Ever felt like a stranger at your own kitchen table?
I worked for years to reach the moment where I could finally stand in front of people who mattered to me and hear the words I had been waiting for. Words that validated the late nights, the extra hours, the sacrifices I made while others were enjoying their weekends. Because this promotion was not just another step on a career ladder, it was proof that I was no longer the one being underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed as someone who was only good at playing safe, and when the company finally announced it, I knew I wanted to celebrate with the people closest to me. Not a big flashy party, just a family dinner where I could breathe, smile, and feel for once that the spotlight was actually mine. That night, I arrived at the restaurant, still a little dazed by the congratulatory calls and the champagne at work, and even though I tried to play it cool, inside I was buzzing, because this was supposed to be my moment, the one night when no one could steal it. The one night when I did not have to share it. But if you have a sibling like I do, you probably already know how these things go, because my sister Claire has always had this way of walking into a room and shifting every single person's attention without asking for it, sometimes by charm, sometimes by sheer audacity, and sometimes by creating drama that no one asked for, and deep down I think she does it because she cannot stand when the attention is not hers. So, in the middle of dinner, when everyone had already toasted me and the conversation was flowing in a direction that for once was about my hard work, she appeared late, sliding in with that deliberate pause in the doorway so that every head would turn. And when I saw what she was wearing, I actually felt my stomach twist because she came in dressed in white, the kind of white you do not wear to a family dinner unless you are making a point, and she stood there grinning before saying, with a laugh that carried louder than it should have, "Guess I'm the real star tonight." The table burst into polite laughter, and I could feel the heat in my chest as my smile froze, because this was not a wedding, it was not her birthday, and it certainly was not her achievement to celebrate. Yet there she was making herself the center of attention again, and the worst part was that everyone went along with it, smiling and chuckling as if it were harmless fun, as if it did not sting to have your night turned into a joke. And while they laughed, I sat there thinking about how this was not the first time, not the second, not even the 10th time she had pulled something like this, because she has a history of stealing moments. My graduation where she announced she had been accepted to her college in the middle of my dinner, my birthday when she made a big reveal about her new car, even my engagement when she tried to hijack the story with a dramatic tale of her breakup. And every single time, the advice from family was the same. Let it go, she does not mean harm, it is not worth the fight. So I sat there, nodding, pretending her little stunt had not bothered me, even though my chest was tight, even though my hands itched to throw her words back in her face. Because something in me clicked that night, and I knew I was done playing along with the script that always left me silent while she laughed. I listened as she made comments about how promotion dinners are basically like weddings, but without rings, listened as she hinted that I should thank her for making the night more exciting, listened as she soaked up the attention that should have been mine. And with every remark I smiled thinner and thinner, until I realized I was not upset anymore. I was calculating, because the timing could not have been better for me. You see, what Claire did not know, what nobody at that table knew, was that I had been sitting on something much bigger than a promotion, something I had been keeping under wraps with my fiancé while we finalized details, something that, once revealed, would eclipse her little performance entirely. So I kept my head down, let her strut, let her believe she had gotten away with it again, while inside I was already laying out the shape of the move I was about to make. And when I raised my glass again to thank everyone for coming, I caught her smirking at me from across the table as though she had just won some unspoken competition, and I realized she really believed she had stolen my night. I did not clap back, I did not throw shade, I did not ruin the dinner by calling her out, because what she did not know is that I already had the one card she could never top. The one announcement that would wipe the smirk off her face faster than any insult ever could. I kept that knowledge close, tucked behind a smile that looked calm but felt electric, because for once I had the upper hand, and she had no idea it was coming. That night ended with the family still laughing about her white dress joke, everyone telling me to laugh it off, and Claire walking away as if she had pulled off another victory. But the truth was she had no clue that by crashing my night, she had handed me the perfect excuse to launch mine. I went home that evening, not angry, not sulking, but almost giddy, because I knew the next step had already been set in motion, and when it landed, Claire would not be the one smiling anymore. When I tell people about that dinner and about Claire's little stunt with the white dress and the line about being the real star, most of them laugh in that way people do when they think it is harmless sibling rivalry. But what almost no one understands is that this was not just one awkward moment at a family gathering. It was the latest chapter in a long-running story where Claire has built a pattern of taking whatever light I managed to earn and dragging it onto herself. And the worst part is that over the years our family has not only allowed it, but encouraged me to stay quiet so as not to stir conflict. Almost like it was my duty to keep the peace by swallowing my resentment while she learned that the quickest way to attention was to use me as her backdrop. I can trace it back as far as high school, when my graduation day should have been about me finally closing that chapter, but right in the middle of our dinner, while relatives were congratulating me, Claire pulled out her acceptance letter and announced she was going to college, turning the entire mood of the night from my milestone to her exciting future, and while my parents scolded her lightly, they still praised her for her achievement. And I sat there with my diploma on the table, realizing how quickly my moment had disappeared. At the time, I told myself it did not matter, because I had other moments ahead of me, bigger ones that she could not possibly hijack, but then the cycle repeated again and again. On my 21st birthday, after everyone sang and I blew out candles, she stood up and announced she had just bought her first car, and instead of people asking about my plans, they were outside admiring her shiny keys. During Thanksgiving one year, when I had invited my then-boyfriend to meet the family for the first time, she interrupted dinner with a dramatic story about her breakup, tears and all. And somehow the evening turned into comfort for her instead of support for me. Even when I got engaged, which was supposed to be one of those unrepeatable, deeply personal milestones, she interrupted the announcement by making it about how her relationships never worked out because men were too intimidated by her independence. A performance that made people laugh nervously and shift the focus once again. For years, I have heard the same advice from my parents, from relatives, even from friends. Let her have it. She does not mean harm. She is insecure. She just wants attention. You are stronger. You can take it. And for years I obeyed, telling myself it was not worth the fight, telling myself that if I reacted I would look jealous, bitter, or petty. But with every passing year, the anger has built quietly inside me, a sense that I was being robbed of pieces of my own life, moments that cannot be replayed, because you only graduate once, you only get engaged once, you only get one 21st birthday. And yet in each of those moments, I was asked to sacrifice my joy so Claire could shine. So when she walked into that dinner wearing white and declaring herself the star, it was not just an obnoxious interruption, it was a trigger that reminded me of every single time I had been told to laugh it off. Every single time my feelings were dismissed for the sake of avoiding family drama. And as I looked around the table that night, watching everyone chuckle and glance at her instead of me, it was like I could see the entire pattern stretched out before me, years of silence piled up into one long, humiliating truth. I had let her win too many times, and every time I swallowed my anger, I gave her permission to do it again. This time, though, something in me shifted, because I realized that the timing had finally aligned in a way that made it possible to not only protect my moment, but reclaim every moment she had stolen, all at once. My fiancé and I had been quietly finalizing our wedding date, choosing to keep it private until the details were set, and sitting at that table with her smirk plastered across her face. I knew instantly that I did not have to confront her with words or arguments or bitter fights. I only had to wait for the right reveal. For once, I held something bigger, something she could not spin back onto herself, and that thought made me calmer than I had ever been in situations like this. I remember sipping my wine, pretending to laugh along, while inside I was already mapping out the exact sequence of how the news would drop, who would see it first, how the family chat would react, and most importantly, How Claire would react when she realized that her little performance in white was not just annoying, but had actually pushed me to finally stop letting her get away with it. I knew she had no idea what was coming, and that was the sweetest part, because for the first time, she had handed me the perfect setup without even knowing it. And as I drove home that night, with my fiancé's hand resting on mine and both of us quiet in the car, I could feel the weight of all those years of being overshadowed starting to lift, because I knew what was about to happen would not just be revenge for that dinner, but justice for every single moment she had stolen before. The next move was already forming in my head, and I could not stop replaying her words, "Guess I'm the real star tonight," because soon enough, she was going to find out what it felt like when someone else took the spotlight in a way she could never match. When I got home that night after the dinner, still replaying Claire's entrance in my mind and the way everyone laughed along like it was all just harmless fun, I knew there was no going back to the old routine where I would pretend it didn't bother me. Because this time I had a weapon in my hands that she could not anticipate, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my silence had already become part of the setup, almost like I was giving her rope she would later trip over. My fiancé, Daniel, had been watching everything unfold too, and though he didn't say much during dinner, I could see the tightness in his jaw. The kind of restrained frustration that comes when someone you love is humiliated and you know it is not your place to interfere. But the moment we were alone in the car, he asked the one question that mattered most. "Are you ready to finally put a stop to this?" That question lingered with me for days, because the truth was we had been keeping our engagement quiet for reasons that had nothing to do with Claire, reasons that had to do with wanting to set the date before inviting the whole family circus into it, reasons that had to do with wanting something sacred between us before it became another topic for everyone else to dissect. But sitting in that car, with the echo of Claire's smug laugh still in my ears, I realized that timing is everything, and maybe we had been waiting for the perfect moment when in reality the perfect moment had just presented itself. Only it came wrapped in the most infuriating package possible. So over the next few days, Daniel and I sat down and made the final calls we had been putting off, confirming the venue, locking in the date, and reaching out to the people we trusted to keep their mouths shut until we were ready to release the news. I felt this almost electric satisfaction with every box we checked off, like each one was another step closer to reclaiming the ground that had been stolen from me over the years. We worked late into the night on the design of the save the date, not flashy or pretentious, just elegant and clear, something that would hit like a hammer not because of the design but because of what it represented, because the moment it landed, there would be no way for Claire to make herself bigger, louder, or more important. During all of this planning, I kept thinking back to the countless conversations with family where I had been told to just let her have it, and for the first time I realized how deeply those words had carved into me, shaping me into someone who stayed quiet to preserve other people's comfort while slowly letting go of my own pride. It made me angry to think about how much I had lost by staying quiet, but instead of letting that anger spill into another fight with Claire, I channeled it into the plan, into making sure that when this card hit her mailbox, she would not just feel left out of the spotlight, she would finally understand what it was like to be blindsided the way I had been so many times before. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that revenge wasn't just about getting back at her, it was about teaching the entire family a lesson too, because they had enabled her, they had laughed along, they had asked me to swallow my feelings for the sake of peace, and now they were about to learn that my silence didn't mean I was weak, it meant I was waiting. I pictured the group chat lighting up as the first photos of the card were sent around. Imagined the awkward silence that would fall when they realized Claire wasn't the one with the headline moment this time, and most of all I imagined her reaction, the tears, the outrage, the desperate phone call where she would try to spin it back onto me, and in that vision, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, control. Daniel and I didn't rush the process either. We wanted every detail perfect so there would be no cracks she could dig her claws into, no weak spots she could exploit to flip the story back in her favor. By the time the final version of the save the date was ready to go, I was practically vibrating with anticipation, because I knew what was coming would not just be another announcement. It would be the moment Claire finally realized that I was no longer the easy target she could steamroll over with her attention-seeking stunts. So I smiled through family calls that week, let them keep bringing up her real star line as though it was the cleverest thing they had ever heard, let them laugh about how I took it so well, because all the while I was holding on to the secret that their laughter had an expiration date, and when it ran out, the joke would turn into silence. Claire thought she had won that night, but what she didn't realize was that the game had shifted completely, and this time I was the one holding all the cards. In the days leading up to the moment when the save the dates would finally be released, I found myself walking a very fine line between keeping my composure so that no one suspected a thing and secretly savoring the knowledge that everything was already in motion. And it was only a matter of time before Claire's smug little narrative of being the star collapsed under the weight of something she could not outshine, because unlike all of the moments she had hijacked from me in the past, this one was built on a foundation that was mine alone, something permanent, something undeniable, and something she could not twist into her own story, no matter how hard she tried. What surprised me most during those days was how calm I felt, because normally after Claire pulled one of her stunts, I would stew for days, vent privately, and eventually force myself to swallow the bitterness, but this time the bitterness was replaced by a steady, almost electric anticipation, the kind you feel when you know justice is coming and you don't have to lift a finger to fight for it anymore. I let my family chatter about Claire's white dress moment like it was some hilarious anecdote that should be retold every time the phone rang, and each time someone repeated the line, "Guess I'm the real star tonight," I forced myself to smile, nod, and even laugh along, all the while keeping the real punchline tucked safely inside my head. There was a strange satisfaction in playing along, almost like I was humoring children who thought they were getting away with something clever, when in reality they were only reinforcing the setup for the reveal I had in store. Claire herself, of course, leaned into the story harder than anyone else, bringing it up in group texts, telling people how everyone couldn't stop laughing, and making sure the spotlight stayed on her even after the dinner was long over. And while in the past that would have broken me down, this time it only fueled me, because every arrogant word she spoke made me more certain that the silence I was keeping was worth it. Daniel, who had been working side by side with me on all the wedding planning logistics, kept asking if I was nervous about the family's reaction, not because he doubted me but because he knows how easily people twist stories when emotions run high. And I told him that for once I wasn't nervous at all, because no matter how they spun it, the fact would remain that this was my engagement, my wedding, my future, and nothing could reduce it to a side note in Claire's ongoing performance. I reminded him, and maybe even myself, that Claire wasn't the type to accept being overshadowed gracefully, but that was exactly the point. This wasn't just about telling people our date. It was about finally ending the cycle of her always taking from me without consequence, because once the cards were in everyone's hands, once the family group chat lit up with the news, there would be no way to undo the blow. As we packed each card into envelopes and double-checked the mailing list, I thought about all the times I had been forced to swallow moments of humiliation, each one still sharp in my memory. Each one shaping me into someone who was constantly told to be the bigger person, and I realized that this card was not just paper with a date and location. It was a declaration that I was done being the quiet background to Claire's theatrics. I thought about my graduation dinner, about the birthday with the car announcement, about the engagement overshadowed by her pity party over men, and I imagined all of those moments funneling into this one act, this one decisive reveal. And the weight of all those years made the anticipation even sweeter. When the envelopes were finally sealed and ready to go, I felt this strange calmness wash over me, the kind you feel when a decision is already made and all you have to do is wait for the outcome, because there was nothing left to debate, no second-guessing, no wavering. Claire had spent years building her identity on being the louder voice, the bigger presence, the one who made everything about her, but she had never stopped to consider what would happen if the person she used as a backdrop finally decided to step forward. I didn't need to make a speech. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't even need to insult her, because the truth was that this one piece of mail, arriving quietly and without ceremony, would dismantle her sense of control in a way no argument ever could. I went to bed that night knowing that the countdown had begun, and for the first time in my life, I didn't dread how Claire would respond or how my family would excuse her. Because the balance of power had shifted and I was no longer the one scrambling to hold on to scraps of attention while she soaked up the applause. Tomorrow, they would open their mailboxes and see the date that belonged to me, and Claire would finally understand what it felt like to be on the other side of the performance, stripped of the ability to spin, stripped of the ability to steal, stripped of the spotlight she thought she owned by default. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I realized that the calm I felt was not just relief, it was the satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow, no matter what chaos followed, Claire's reign of hijacked moments would come to an end, and for once, she would have to face what it felt like to be left out of the laughter. The morning the save the dates went out, I remember waking up with that kind of nervous energy you usually only feel before something big, like an interview or an exam, except this time the outcome was already decided. Because once those envelopes were dropped in the mail, there was no taking them back, no second guessing, no chance to soften the blow for Claire, and I did not want to soften it anyway, since this was not about cruelty. This was about balance, finally tipping back in my direction. After years of being told to step aside while she thrived in the attention she stole from me, Daniel kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, and I could tell he wanted to ask again if I was ready for the fallout, but he stayed quiet, maybe because he already knew the answer. Maybe because he understood better than anyone that I had been waiting my entire adult life for this moment when I no longer had to play the role of the quiet, accommodating older sister who let things slide. That afternoon, as the first messages started popping up in the family group chat, I sat at my desk pretending to focus on work, but really refreshing my phone every few minutes. Watching the little bubbles of excitement grow into a full stream of congratulations, surprise, and even shock, and for once, every single message had my name in it instead of hers. I could almost hear the tone in my mother's voice when she typed, "We are so thrilled and can't believe you managed to keep it a secret this long," and my aunt chimed in with, "Finally some good news we can all celebrate together." And while most of the family was swept up in happiness, I was only half paying attention to their words, because all I could think about was how long it would take before Claire responded. It didn't take long. About an hour into the stream of joyful reactions, her name popped up with a message that wasn't congratulations, wasn't supportive, wasn't even neutral. Instead, she wrote, "Wow, thanks for blindsiding me. I guess some people don't care who they hurt as long as they get their moment." It was exactly the kind of self-centered response I expected, but the part that made me laugh was how transparent it was, because in trying to frame herself as the victim, she had actually admitted out loud what the whole thing was really about. She hated that it wasn't her turn. The chat went silent for a few minutes after her message, as though the entire family didn't know how to handle the tension, and then one by one, relatives awkwardly changed the subject back to congratulations, ignoring her sulk. An hour later, my phone rang, and when I saw her name flashing across the screen, I knew exactly how the conversation would go, so I took a deep breath, answered, and listened as she immediately launched into accusations, telling me I had purposely chosen to send the save the dates right after her special night, that I had humiliated her, that I had made her look small in front of everyone. I let her rant for a while, let her voice rise higher and higher, and when she finally stopped for breath and demanded, "Do you even understand what you've done to me?" I answered with the calmest voice I have ever managed in my life, saying, "Yes, Claire, I understand perfectly, because for years you've been doing it to me, and now you finally know what it feels like." There was silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that tells you the person has been knocked off script, because she didn't expect me to call her out so directly, and when she finally spoke again her voice cracked, almost like she was crying. And she said, "You're supposed to be my sister, you're supposed to support me." That was the moment I realized she wasn't angry about the wedding, she was angry about losing her role as the permanent star in every story, and I told her, slowly and clearly, "I am your sister. But that doesn't mean my life exists to make space for you, and if you think being supported means I should give up my own milestones so you can shine, then you're confusing love with submission." She hung up on me after that, and for a while I just sat there, staring at the phone, letting the weight of the years we had spent locked in this unspoken battle settle into my chest. But instead of feeling regret or guilt, I felt something closer to release. Like I had finally stepped out of a role I never agreed to play. Later that evening, Daniel poured me a glass of wine, and we sat on the couch reading through all the supportive messages that kept rolling in, and even though Claire's bitterness lingered in the background, I didn't care. Because for once the attention was mine and no one could take it away. Over the following days, the family dynamic shifted subtly. A few relatives checked in with me privately to say they thought Claire had overreacted. Others avoided bringing her up at all, and my parents, who had always been the ones telling me to let her have the spotlight, finally admitted that maybe they had let her behavior slide for too long. I didn't press the issue, because I wasn't looking for validation from them anymore. The real victory was in watching Claire's usual tricks fall flat, because no matter what she tried, the fact remained that everyone was talking about my wedding, not her. And while some people might think it's petty to feel satisfaction in watching someone else's tears, the truth is that I didn't want her to hurt just for the sake of hurting. I wanted her to learn, and whether she admitted it or not, I think she finally did. She learned that my silence didn't mean weakness, it meant patience, and patience has an expiration date. She learned that you can only take so much from someone before they take something back. And she learned that when you spend years building your identity on stealing the spotlight, losing it even once feels like devastation. So when I look back on it now, I don't see the save the date as revenge, I see it as balance being restored. Claire got to feel for the first time what I had felt 100 times before, and even though the family may never fully understand the depth of it, I know I won something bigger than an argument. I won my freedom from being her shadow. And maybe the question that lingers, the one people will wonder if I ever tell this story out loud, is whether I went too far, whether mailing those cards the day after her stunt was too sharp, too cutting, too deliberate. But the truth is, I don't lose sleep over that, because when Claire saw that card, when she realized her tears wouldn't change a thing, I finally felt what it meant to win, and for me, that was enough.